Thank you, Madam Chair. The opposition supports the amendments. As I said earlier, it really was due to the pressure from all the stakeholders that the government has introduced these amendments. I note that I've already given an overview of the amendments in my earlier speech, and I will not repeat that. But what's astonishing here, Madam Chair, is this, that the government failed to submit the bill in its original form with these appropriate provisions in the first place. The notice of motion for the bill was first introduced in the other place on 29 October 2009. The amendments were not advised by the government until basically yesterday on the 25th of November. One only has to imagine the stress and concern of small business operators during this period. What they had to go through each day, having absolutely no idea of what was going to happen to the value of their place.
Cavalier disregard.
Couldn't care less.
Absolutely.
You know, the number of letters, calls, personal visits I received alone was far too many to mention. Far too many. And yet, you know, it's extraordinary. I mean, you know, this government has a duty to ensure, that legislation is not put together in such a haphazard and rushed fashion. It has a duty to ensure that there is proper prior consultation with all stakeholders, all relevant stakeholders. Now that doesn't mean you first prepare the legislation, put it all together before the House, then you go and talk to the stakeholders. That's not what prior consultation means, and that's exactly what this government did. But sadly, time and time again, the government fails to adhere to these two very simple rules. But what's really amazing today, is that this government gets up today, the parliamentary secretary, and suddenly takes credit for these amendments. It takes credit for putting together these amendments to improve the legislation. It was always the case. I mean, you would never have put these amendments through. You didn't even bother speaking to the stakeholders at all. It wasn't until the pressure was put on you, when it was clear you got it wrong, that suddenly we put these amendments, and now you take credit for it. You take credit for it. It's just wonderful. And what they do is they try and sell you the story that they're just little minor amendments from the original bill. Minor amendments. I mean, for goodness sake, obviously the government members don't read their own amendments. They're not minor in any shape or form. You know, Madam Chair, the Parliamentary Secretary uses two very interesting phrases when she talks about these amendments. She starts by saying that the government take the time, they were her words, take the time to carefully balance. With all due respect to the Parliamentary Secretary, you didn't take the time and you didn't carefully balance when this bill was first put to the other House. You didn't. You should have presented the legislation in proper form the first time and not put the stakeholders through that pressure. As indicated earlier, the opposition clearly supports the amendments, but I do have a question to the Parliamentary Secretary, if she would please consider this. And if unable to get back to us today, maybe she can take it on notice. What occurs if a person acquires one of these non-transferable licences for 12 months and after a short period of time, before the 12 months expires, that person either wants to surrender the licence or sadly passes away? Is the person or the person's executor permitted to surrender or hand back that licence and obtain a proportionate refund of the monies paid? I haven't been able to find that in the legislation. If the Parliamentary Secretary could assist. Thank you, Madam Chair.